Clear up. Outside bumper barely.
And welcome to another episode of Historic Hot Laps. Thanks for joining us today. We've got quite a few things to talk about. Had a good race weekend, doubleheader at Iowa, NASCAR All Series at Pocono, and a couple other little things to talk about. So I guess let's start off with some news. Looking at the IMSA World, a couple good articles about Chip Ganassi Racing is still working on their manufacturer deal. Since Cadillac and Chip Ganassi are going to be parting ways at the end of this season, obviously Chip Ganassi is trying to stay in IMSA in some sort of capacity. So that's going to put him somewhere in the GTP class, most likely LMP2. Without factory partnership is going to be tough for them to pull off. So I'd say probably GTP class of some sort. I'm not sure what they're going to run as far as that goes. Might be able to run something, one of their other partners, but yeah, it's a little too late to see them lock up a factory deal for 2025, but it is Chip Ganassi Racing. They have all the resources, so I guess anything is possible, but it'll be interesting next year without them in the LMP2 class if they don't figure something out before then. IndyCar news. Looks like the Iowa event popularity is still strong as ever. Hy-Vee and Iowa Speedway have done a 3-year agreement for an extension, so we should see at least one, maybe double headers each year, however it may work out, but for the next 3 years we should see them on the schedule for IndyCar, so there is that. Going into Iowa, had some grid penalties for Graham Rahal and Kiffin Simpson, unapproved engine penalties, which is a 9 starting spot delay for them based on their qualifying results. And the reason for these penalties is kind of interesting. Obviously, we saw a lot of engine failures. Things happen over the month of May at the Indy 500, but going into Iowa, there was still some issues with some motors. Where the penalty comes from is each one of these engines has a certain mileage requirement on them, or time used requirement, and if you don't meet that and you change more than 4 engines without meeting the mileage, then you start incurring penalties basically. So instead of running the lifespan of these engines, they're trying to find speed, right? It's an oval, short track, doubleheader weekend. Graham's pulled off a doubleheader back when he did Detroit years ago. The dream is still there for them to try to pull that off. Running a 5th engine after the 4 assigned engines and not mileaging those out comes with a penalty. Not a super severe penalty overall, so that's nice for him, but it is still a penalty regardless. So going into Iowa, they had that going on. And then aside from that, there's a little rumor mill going on. Pretty calm week in IndyCar news for the first time in a few weeks, so kind of nice. But the rumor is, obviously we talked previously about, and take this for what it's worth, it's very, very rumor. We talked about Hailie Deegan and AM Racing splitting in Xfinity. Well, then Hailie Deegan shows up Friday at Iowa, hanging out with the Andretti paddock, getting a double-seater ride around Iowa, and then talking, there's a couple clips of her talking grip levels with some of the teams and what's going on, and she was a guest obviously, but social media stuff these days says a lot, and she went from AM Racing everything on her social medias. The Logano message comes out that he's going to run Chicago. She then deletes everything AM Racing off her social platforms. And mind you, she is very social media driven. That's what's helped her get to where she is and land these sponsorships. She is a good driver too. I'm not going to discredit her there, but she is very social media driven. So she gets rid of AM Racing. She ends up adding Andretti Global and showing up at Iowa and hanging out, this and that. Obviously, they've got a big push. They've got Jamie Chadwick doing things for them in there. Their female racing program is getting stronger and stronger. Hailie would bring a little bit to the table for them. Like I said, it's rumors. It's so much rumor, but I don't know. I guess we'll see what comes of all that. And I guess while we are on the subject of Hailie Deegan, it came out yesterday, since she's currently kind of an unemployed driver. I mean, there's still a lot of irons in the fire for her, I'm sure. She will be in the driver lineup for the Speed Tour All-Star race at Lime Rock Park that's coming up, which there's been several celebrity drivers involved with that race. Obviously, the Grand Marshal they announced is going to be Jeff Bodine. Al Unser Jr. is going to do the commentary on it. There's a lot of cool stuff with that, but yeah, she's going to drive one of Ken Schrader's entries at that race, the All-Star race at Lime Rock Park. So that'll be pretty cool to see. Be interesting to see. He's got some decent equipment. See what kind of moves she can make, because with everything with her being judged for the AM Racing performances and all that, it'll be real interesting to see how that goes. So another positive for Hailie Deegan and getting back behind the wheel. Let's go over some race recaps for this last week. Like I said, we had some pretty busy weekend of racing with the doubleheaders and the big leagues and all that. A little less dirt track action, but that's all right. We had Kubota High Limit at Portsmouth Raceway on Saturday night. They had 29 entries going into this one, which is good to see. That series is just growing in popularity, and as drivers get a chance to try to check it out with those 410s, works out pretty well. Overall, good racing, pretty action-packed. Feature win went to Rico, California kid, Rico Abreu. Again, another win on the season. Multiple wins this season, so good to see from him. Going over to the USAC world, it was pretty well off week for everybody except for the National Midget Series. There's a pretty good storyline with that one there. Dawson Pursley was on a winning streak. He won 3 straight events at 3 different tracks over the last couple weeks in the Midget Series, so had some real good momentum going there, good points for the season. And then Friday night, Jefferson County Speedway race. That one went to Justin Grant, so congrats to that team on that win. And that kind of wraps up the dirt track action. Let's talk about, it's kind of a toss-up. Do we want to talk about Indy or do we want to talk about NASCAR first? But let's go with the NASCAR Pocono weekend. Obviously you had Trucks Friday, Xfinity Saturday, and Cup Series on Sunday. Pretty standard formatting, so good to see overall. Trucks on Friday night. That was a pretty solid race. Stage 1 battle between Eckes and Corey Heim was tight all through the final laps of that first stage. Corey Heim ended up getting the stage win after clearing Eckes in kind of a half slide job deal. Stage 2 started to see a little more rubbing. Sage Karam actually got in a 3-wide situation and got squeezed and cut down a tire, lost a lot of position. Corey Heim, right place, right time again, gets the win on that one. Then we had some weather, push the race for a little bit. Rain every single weekend in NASCAR anymore. It's been pretty wild, but surprised to hear this one for the win on the truck race, but Corey Heim. So total domination by Corey Heim and his team. Clean sweep of the whole race, stage 1, stage 2, and the win. Every restart it looked like he was just on rails. He had such a power advantage, it looked like, even though obviously the guy can drive. He had a great day. The Toyotas, everybody knew Toyotas were probably going to be the ones to beat going into Pocono, but he proved that in the truck race, that at least in the truck race for sure, the Toyotas were gonna battle it all. The battle for second behind Corey Heim was pretty awesome between Enfinger and Eckes. They were trading paint a little bit, going back and forth on who was the second spot on that one, and man, it was a pretty exciting finish to that race. So congrats Corey Heim, again, race win, all stages, just overall just killing it. So moving from there, Xfinity on Saturday. That one was more of just a general race, in my opinion. It was a pretty good race, but not a whole lot of action at the beginning. Some good clean passing, just good racing. Stage 1 goes to Justin Allgaier. He looked like he was going to be the one to beat after that first stage. And then stage 2 ended up going to Cole Custer. Allgaier had some issues, kind of fell back, but Cole Custer gets the second stage victory and then gets all the points for there. And then the win also goes to Cole Custer. So congrats to that team. I do believe he will be the pick for the Cup Haas team. He's proven that he's got what it takes to get it done. We'll see next season how that all plays out. But yeah, he's getting it. Great performance at the end of that race. The real takeaway from the Xfinity race was we had Josh Berry driving that number 15 AM racing car that we mentioned earlier in the episode that Hailie Deegan was driving until they parted ways and got a lot of flack for her performance and whatnot. Well, at the end of it, obviously we know Josh Berry's a good driver. Full Cup ride, good driver. He had great stuff with JRM when he was in Xfinity. He made a lot of stuff happen. He's one of those drivers that didn't come around early. He's got a lot of experience, and he's grown with that experience. Well, he took that AM racing car nowhere, basically. Ended up multiple laps down, multiple issues with the car, ride heights, setup, cutting the tires, fender rubs, cutting tires, like all around the chassis was not set up right. And Logano did better in it, obviously in Chicago, but it still wasn't spectacular. And then you put a guy in there like Josh Berry and you still get subpar results. Like, maybe it's not so much the drivers, maybe when you start looking at who's car chief in this whole deal, what kind of equipment they have. They've got Stewart Haas backing, and they're not even competing. Stewart Haas car won that race. So it's just, I don't know. My personal opinion, I don't think it's a driver deal at this point. I think we need to be looking a little bit deeper than drivers. And following up on Sunday with the Cup race. Really, overall, pretty decent race. Kind of what you'd expect out of Pocono. It was a Pocono race. There was nothing spectacular about it, but there was some good on-track action. Stage 1, the favorite to win this race, Martin Truex Jr., he captured Stage 1 and ran pretty well. Obviously, we thought Toyota was going to dominate, and they did in the Truck Series. And then you had, Ford get the win on Saturday with Xfinity. Toyota coming back to get a first stage win on the Cup Series day on Sunday with Truex. Stage 2 goes to Hamlin. Again, another Toyota, so you're thinking, all right, this is what's going to happen. Well, lurking in the background in that Penske Ford was Ryan Blaney. And he had been, top 5 contender all day. Top 10 first stage, top 5 second stage, I believe, as far as running pace goes. And he gets it done through those stages, stays up where he needs to be, kind of pulls his strategy and flips the stage a little bit, goes on to get the win. So congrats Ryan Blaney, Team Penske. He got it done. Second win of the season for him, which is good. He's starting to really get that momentum that, he's not, he had that Iowa win, now win at Pocono, completely different style of track. He's getting to be more diverse. As we get closer to the end of this, he's very secure in the points now. Playoff secured already with that win. It's really going to be interesting to see how it goes for him going into the playoffs. Could he do a repeat champion deal? Possible. It's very possible. At the beginning of the season, I would have said no, but it's very possible now. See what he can come up with. So, rounding off the podium, you had second place Denny Hamlin, third place Alex Bowman. Towards the end of that last stage, you had pretty wild restart. There's a lot of drama about it with Corey LaJoie and Kurt Busch and how it looked like LaJoie basically punted Busch, and that ended up taking out a couple other cars as he went up the track. So I don't know. There's a lot of varying opinion. When you look at the on-car stuff, it looks like Corey was very, very aggressive when he didn't need to be. They were already in a 5-6 wide scenario. They could have tightened up the pack and then tried another pass, but he goes to the low line. Busch does a little bit of a block, nothing real extreme. LaJoie bumps into him and then tries to do the pass again, and almost looks like he ran out of time before that corner, because you can see where that yellow line comes up and you lose your banking at Pocono, and it appeared that he kind of thought he was running out of time. Kind of gets back over in line, gets into the back corner of Busch. And again, another horrible weekend for Busch and that RCR car. It's just, at this point, I don't know what they're going to do to pull their season together, but he needs something. And I mean, that's the thing, you run mid-pack, you're going to get mixed up in everybody else's nonsense. And I do believe Corey was out of line with that one, from what I can see. Obviously, I've got the camera angles like everybody else does, but in the moment, obviously, I'm not behind the wheel like they are. So, I don't know. We'll see what happens for Busch. His hunt for the playoffs is getting pretty bad. Wishing the best of luck, but, you know, there's good seasons and bad seasons, and this just might not be his season. You know, he even said it in an interview himself. He said there's seasons where you're on top and there's seasons where you're on the bottom. So that being said, let's take a look at the playoff picture. This is where we stand. So you've got 12 that are locked into the playoffs right now. Starting number 1, Larson. Number 2, Hamlin. Number 3, Byron. Number 4, Bell. Number 5 is Elliott. Number 6 is Reddick. 7 is Blaney. 8 is Keselowski. 9 is Bowman. 10 Logano. 11 Suarez. And 12 is Cindric. And then those are your locked in numbers. And then continuing on, 13th place is Martin Truex Jr. with 125 points up from the line. Ty Gibbs behind him at 14th with 84 points up the line. Ross Chastain, 15th place, 53 points up above the cut line. And then the last one above the cut line is Chris Buescher with plus 45 on his points. Then going below the cut, Bubba Wallace still just right there on the edge at negative 45. I believe he had a 10th or 11th place this weekend, so he had a better run than he has had. Let's see who else. Oh yeah, Briscoe. You got Briscoe minus 88 points below the cut line. Then Kyle Busch negative 98. So he's not losing a whole lot, but he's not gaining anything either. And this is really the push on the season where you need to be above that cut line. Secure yourself with a race win, but let's be honest, the only way Busch is probably going to get in, unless something crazy happens, which it happens in NASCAR all the time, logically the only way it looks like it's going to happen is by points. So he's got to get some better finishes. He's got to get up there and get a podium at least, try to help him out. Top fives, whatever it takes. So that kind of wraps up the Pocono NASCAR weekend. 50th anniversary of Pocono Speedway, the Tricky Triangle as they call it. So pretty awesome to see that sold out crowds. There's some crazy amount of like RV spots. They're like 3,000 or something in track RV spots. It's just wild. But yeah, good fun weekend for those that were there. So keep supporting the racing and what's going on. And doubleheader at Iowa for IndyCar. IndyCar doubleheader. So I guess first let's start off talking about the weekend format. So Friday they had the Highline practice, followed by a split practice group. Try to get, cars a little on track action without too much cluster. It is just under a mile oval, so it gets busy on that if you put all the cars on it at once. Then following that, Saturday you had qualifying for both races. First lap for the first race, second lap speed would be your qualification lap for the second race. Post qualifying, a small break, a little concert, Luke Combs concert, and then starting the night race on Saturday night. Then I believe there was Eric Church concert Saturday night, and then you go back to racing again on Sunday, followed by a couple more concerts. So pretty busy weekend for the teams and everybody else there. Fun weekend for the fans, a lot of fan experience and engagement. Going into it, Firestone had brought in a new compound for the tires on the right side. Going into a little tire science, right side tires on a banked oval see a different wear pattern than left side. A lot of times you'll see it not so much in IndyCar because of the way the balance works on those cars, but in NASCAR, stock cars type deal, you'll see guys that'll just take right side tires when they come in, so shorten their stop a little bit, get the right side tires to help them make those corners. IndyCar is obviously different than that, but they were talking a new compound for the right side tires since they did some tire tests after the repave. supposed to be a little softer compound, a little more wear over the stint of the tire, and not break down thermally to so much of the heat that track will hold. So going into qualifying, McLaughlin set a new record, which we talked about with the repave and everything else, 188 miles an hour. So for a guy that's only been on ovals for a few years, that's pretty awesome to see. He's really taking it. He's really getting it done. Previous to the night race on Saturday, race 1 of the doubleheader, Jack Harvey's dealing with some serious neck and back pains, some injuries. He did what he could to mitigate that. Tried to get sub-driver approvals for the Saturday night race. That did not go well, just due to the fact that whoever was going to drive that to have some practice laps and not just get on a cold track in a car that they weren't familiar with. Obviously, Connor Daly, the sub of the year for most teams, he was there at that event. Him and Jack Harvey are friends. He asked him like, "Hey, will you drive my car?" Dale Coyne and Connor Daly have a good relationship. Well, IndyCar wouldn't let it happen for the Saturday night race because he had no practice time in the car, which is unfortunate. So Harvey did make an attempt, and it was short-lived to get a couple laps in, but he just couldn't do it. Harvey posted a thing, or he'd been working with the Indy medical car staff and everything else, and just a lot of pain and discomfort trying to drive that car and still perform and be in that much pain. Like, it's just not a safe situation overall, which is unfortunate. But Daly was there to step in. He was not allowed to step in for the Saturday night race, but he did step in on Sunday. So that was nice for the team, but unfortunately a mechanical issue Sunday. They ended up like 27th and had to retire. I think they were 2/3 through the race, like lap 157 or something, but he didn't make it happen for him, unfortunately, due to the mechanical failure. And that's what you get with some of those, lower budget cars, lower budget teams like the Coins and stuff. They do a lot of development for drivers, and they're very important to the operation, but they're not a Penske or Ganassi team, right? They're not going to be on the podium every weekend. So either way, good experience, good for the sport to see Connor back in. Obviously, he's got some stuff coming up in Truck Series and Xfinity this upcoming weekend at the Brickyard. So that'll be good to see for him. But as far as IndyCar stuff goes, he did fulfill a sub obligation, which was good to see, but didn't pan out to a whole lot. So let's cover race 1 Saturday night. First lap wreck with David Malukas dropping a little low on the white line, backing it in, tied up Grosjean and Canapino. I believe Canapino got the worst of that deal, but just a short track mistake. It's unfortunate for that team that both their cars were involved in that, but these things, racing things happen. What's crazy is during that same thing, Lundgaard did basically the same move that Malukas did, dropping a little too low and backing it in, but he kept it off the wall, which was fortunate for that team. Other than that, there was just a lot of in and outs, a lot of good passing. Ferrucci was wild in all his passing attempts and the stuff he was pulling off. He had to serve a stop and go penalty and moved him down to 22nd place, and then he moved back up the field on every restart, multiple passes, like just getting it done. Several penalties for out-of-line restarts for the single file rule, single file restarts and guys being out of line. There's a few different guys that got penalties for that. Ferrucci's was the main one they talked about. He was definitely out of line, but he wasn't out of line all the way. No different than what pretty much everybody else was doing. So that one's kind of rough, but it is what it is. So we had the little action on the pit cycles, the last pit stop. Herta took the undercut, tried to fix the vibration. He had a horrible vibration in that car. Trying to strategize that win. If he would have been able to get that undercut, that might have put him in a really good spot. But as he's in the pit wall, as he's pitting, Palou puts it in the wall, brings out the caution, which with Herta already trying to do the undercut and then being in the pits when the caution is thrown, completely screwed up his strategy for the rest of the race. So going into the end of it, McLaughlin took the lead, led for quite a while, and he ends up getting the win. So McLaughlin gets his first oval win on race 1 of the doubleheader weekend. He had Pato O'Ward in second, and Newgarden made up quite a bit of ground and got third. For starting halfway back, he definitely made some things happen. Not the domination in Iowa you would expect from him, but it's just one of those things. He's having a rough season, as we've all seen. Obviously, he pulled off the 500, but aside from that, and after the controversy in St. Pete at race 1, things have been pretty rough for that team. But McLaughlin's still getting it done for Team Penske overall. He's in a good groove with things. Great performance. He's new track record, gets the race win. Yeah, just overall great performance from the Thirsty Threes this weekend. Let's go into race 2 on Sunday. This race was pretty calm overall. It was pretty boring, not a whole lot. There was still some on-track passing by Ferrucci and whatnot, but it's just kind of boring overall, honestly. The hybrid and the ovals is a real situation, which we'll cover that here in a minute. But as far as the race recap goes, the who would where, Will Power does the unthinkable. He goes way off strategy, makes up a ton of laps, and he ends up getting the win. Kind of a memorial win for him, 43rd win of his career, which ties him with Michael Andretti for the 4th overall in IndyCar race wins. So congrats to that team again. Penske again, and Penske again. They won Pocono, won both the races at Iowa for IndyCar. Just a good weekend for Team Penske in the office there in North Carolina. So Palou ends up in second place on that one. Kind of got it figured out after his wreck on the first race. And then McLaughlin gets third. So McLaughlin gets win and a podium, which is pretty sweet for his points especially. Going into the checkered flag, there's a massive wreck. It looked like Rossi was losing pace. He was still in the racing line. He wasn't fully off pace, but Stingray Robb just trying to make a push right at the end. And those Foyt cars are good on ovals, we know that. And he's got a ton of speed. Ends up getting into the back of Rossi, which sends him tumbling through the air. Like a pretty big wreck. Sends him end over end. Also tangles up Ed Carpenter and David Malukas. And just wild. Carpenter's cars parked on top of Malukas on the halo. Rossi's car's destroyed on the back half. Granted, tub and everything might be all right, but just a weird scenario, just a weird racing deal. There's a whole lot going on with should Rossi have been off the racing line. And honestly, when you look at the replay, it's hard to tell the speed because obviously they're going really fast, but he could pull himself off the racing line in that corner and wreck himself out anyway. So either way is probably not a good option. But pretty wild finish. Everybody's okay from that crash. They did airlift Stingray Robb out of Iowa to just due to traffic and stuff. Airlifted him to the hospital, got him checked out. He was released. So I don't know if there will be any long-term things with that where he might need to take Toronto off, or I don't know. I guess we'll see. They've been kind of quiet about it. I'm sure he's a little rattled, but hopefully concussion protocol and all that, hopefully he's fine. Will Power gets the win on that race and a big old crash at the end. Going into the post-race interviews, Ed Carpenter had a lot of interesting things to say and about the way the hybrid cars are running, what they've got in their package, and kind of how he's not a big supporter of this whole hybrid initiative when it comes to these Indy cars and what they're doing.
Get used to this. This is what I tested at Nashville and Milwaukee. Talked to Alex after he texted Gateway. The ovals are going to look like this, I think, until we figure out how to get the downforce tire package right and get some weight back off of them. Like, to me, I understand why we're doing the hybrid, so we can say we're a hybrid series, but it's costing us a bunch of money, making the product worse. I don't see the point. The most expensive 100 pounds I've ever bolted on my race cars.
So like I said, he had some comments to say. I don't know. We'll see how it goes with being a team owner with that much to say about it. Obviously, it's not something they're going to go away from, but maybe they can try to figure out something to make the oval racing a little bit better with that hybrid. and kind of get back to the glory days of the oval racing, especially as we're adding more and more ovals to the season. We pretty much only have ovals left aside from one or two, so it'll be interesting. But that's our race recap portion. And going into the history portion of this episode of Historic Hot Laps, we're going to cover somebody from the very, very early days, some would say the very first days, and Mr. Barney Oldfield. Berna Eli Barney Oldfield, aka Barney, obviously that's what he went by, but Bernie Eli Oldfield, born January 29th, 1878, and passed away October 4th, 1946. Born in York Township in Fulton County, Ohio, he worked as a water boy and a mascot to raise money to get his very first bicycle. I would like to see what the mascot costumes look like in the 1800s. I bet they were pretty wild. He dropped out of school in the 8th grade to help his father, who was working in a kitchen at a mental asylum during the day, and at nights he worked as a bellboy at a hotel in Toledo. So Toledo, Ohio area. I can't even imagine helping out in a kitchen of an insane asylum, and then going to work at a hotel at night at that age. That's just crazy. He was going by the name Berna until one of his bosses at the hotel that he worked at said that was not a masculine name, and if he was going to be a man of the people, he needed to go by the name Barney. So that's what he did. He started going by Barney and never looked back. Little fun fact there. His name originally, the name Berna, came from one of his father's bunkmates from the Civil War, when they were in the tents together in the Civil War, which is crazy that this goes that far back, but that's why he was named Berna to begin with. It was to honor one of his father's friends from the Civil War. Barney was always known to have quite a good personality, got along with everybody kind of guy, very outgoing. He started out as a bicycle racer, oddly enough. Transitioned to automobiles later in life, but he ran an amateur bicycle racing group. Most of them were half-mile tracks that were reserved for like horse racing and stuff, but they would race bicycles on them. From 1892 to 1896, Barney's prime years on his bicycle, mostly borrowed bikes from friends and his employer at that hotel. He ended up going into gasoline-powered bikes, which now we'll refer to them as a motorcycle to a point, but in a race, he was visiting Salt Lake City, Utah. They had some prototype races going on with these new gasoline-powered bicycles, and this was a huge thing back then, right? Like, this was the biggest thing ever, and they were testing some stuff out in Salt Lake, and he ended up getting on a bike that belonged to a fellow racer, Tom Cooper, and after that point, it was pretty well impressed that he would be the guy to beat on any kind of gasoline-powered bicycle or automobile. This is also what kind of opened up his time to get into auto racing. At that bicycle race where he ran that gasoline-powered bike, there was also another gentleman there by the name of Henry Ford, obviously a well-known individual. This was early in Ford's career. He was just getting his manufacturing plant established in Michigan, and like we've talked about in the past, he among other manufacturers that were trying to get things rolling, what better way to sell your vehicles and the stuff that you're making in your factories than to win races with them and show, that they're the best of the best. So Henry Ford had prepared 2 different vehicles for auto racing, and then he saw how Barney did on that gas-powered bike, approached him to be part of his testing team for these cars and get his input on them. So Barney goes to Michigan, tries to check out these cars that are set up for automobile racing, which wasn't even really a term at the time. The best part about this is him and Tom Cooper go up there, and neither one of the cars would run. They couldn't get either one of them started. They were basically just failed prototypes at this point. And Barney and Tom get to talking, and they have an idea of like, well, let's just buy these cars. So they end up buying the cars as failures from Henry Ford, and they buy them for $800 for a pair, so $400 a piece, which was still a decent amount of money back in those days. And one of these cars ended up becoming quite a legendary piece. It was the number 999 car, still in museums today. And that car, they got it up and running. It made its debut in the 1902 Manufacturers Challenge Cup. This car is in the Ford Museum in Greenfield Village, Michigan currently. But a legendary car, basically the first of its kind. During this race, Oldfield drove it more like a bicycle / motorcycle that he'd been used to, and slid corners rather than fully brake and turning like a lot of guys did. Already with the dirt track, learning how to slide the car right out of the gate in 1902. That gave him a huge advantage over everybody else. And at the end of the race, he ended up with a half a mile lead. It was a 5-mile race overall, and he was leading by half a mile. And at that point, everybody knew he was the guy to beat. 1903, they take the races to the Indiana State Fairgrounds, and Oldfield becomes the very first person to go a mile a minute in a race car, also known as 60 miles an hour. And then a couple months later, he broke his own record and did a mile in 55.8 seconds. So already the fastest guy known to man up to that point, 60 miles an hour in 1903 was probably horrendously scary. I can't even imagine how sketchy that might have been for those guys. After this, setting the record, kind of making moves with the 999 car, business mogul Alexander Winton saw him drive and wanted to form a race team. He would be the driver. Winton would supply the race cars, and that kind of put Oldfield in a weird category where he was just an employed race car driver. He was kind of the first of his type that was just employed to drive. Like, his job was to just race cars that had never been heard of or done before. He was the first one. He traveled all over, racing at fairgrounds, local races, contender series, all the big stuff. Kept going into a Mercedes-Benz car in 1909. He was at an exhibition race in Indianapolis Motor Speedway, IMS, and he won that race. He was super impressed by that Mercedes and continued to race using their cars, and in 1910 was able to break the 70 mile an hour speed barrier. And this kind of opened up a door to, let's just see how much faster we can get these cars to go over and over and over, right? And just taking little chips away at it, getting a little faster every time. Barney ended up calling it his Blitzen Benz, and he had that thing set up as fast as they could figure out how to set it. 1910 goes to Daytona and sets a speed record of 131 miles an hour. So 131 miles an hour in 1910. Mind you, there's no safety things back then. There's nothing to stop anything bad from happening. You're just riding on luck. So here comes something kind of interesting with, he sets this 131 mile an hour record, right? And since these were not approved and sanctioned races, they weren't approved by the AAA organization that we've covered here in the past, Barney ended up being banned from points competition in standard sanctioned races. So he's innovative. He's the only known real race car driver that's proven to just be skilled enough to drive a car and get paid for it. And then the sanctioning body outlaws him from competition because he's doing all these speed tests, which I don't know what the real theory there was. But either way, due to him being outlawed from the regular sanctioned races, him and his manager, Will Pickens, in 1914, they put together the Champion of the Universe competition, which was 35 matches between competitors and manufacturers from all over the globe. Had a huge payday, and Barney took home roughly $250,000 from that. So in 1914, we're talking right at the Depression time, and you've got a guy who's winning $250,000 for this competition racing series. It's just wild. obviously showing that if he wasn't going to be a part of a race series, he was going to start his own. He was reinstated by the AAA, and Barney was able to run the Indy 500 in 1914 and 1916. Both years he got 5th place, but he was the first driver to average a 100-mile-an-hour lap and the highest rated American driver, as most of the good drivers back then were dominated by the European markets. So highest rated American and 100-mile-an-hour lap average, which is pretty impressive in 1914. His exhibition speed tests, he would be paid around $4,000 a test, which, you think about it, you're putting your entire life on the line for that, but he just loved what he did. He also, though, knew the dangers of what was going on, and obviously a lot of guys were losing their lives in this. And in 1917, he kind of developed a car called the Golden Submarine, and that car actually had a integrated roll bar system, which was pretty awesome. This was towards the end of his racing career, but he kind of started the whole thought of, what if we cage the drivers so they're protected to some extent. After debuting that car and running in a 25-mile match in Milwaukee, Oldfield officially retired from racing. So in 1918 he retired, but he lived off of who he was and continued like a public relations type deal for racing, making appearances. He did make an attempt to come back in a race in 1932, but he was unable to find the financial sponsor to keep that going for him, so took quite a break there. So talking about the Golden Submarine car, it was the first design of its kind where the driver was enclosed in a purpose-built cage. The whole design was inspired after Barney lost a close friend, Bob Berman, in a race accident in Corona, California. So unfortunately, that's kind of what happens with a lot of this stuff, is a lot of these safety things and whatnot are written in blood, right? So he ends up losing his friend, ends up designing a car, and then retiring shortly after that. Another thing, he's quite the businessman. Obviously, we talked about him setting up his own racing series, which then got his ban from the AAA series removed because he was pretty heavy competition. But he also had a couple other things going on. Barney and Mr. Carr G. Fisher of Indianapolis founded the Fisher Automobile Company, and this was basically a dealership, first automobile dealership of its kind in the United States. So kind of cool that he was kind of the first to have like a big lot type cars on site dealership. Barney also had his own line of Firestone tires, to which he had a slogan of "Firestone tires are my only life insurance," which is it was a pretty good one for back in the day, especially. He also did a lot of stuff off track, non-racing type performances. 1906, there was a Broadway musical named The Vanderbilt Cup. It ran for 10 weeks, and Barney was a star of that on Broadway as himself. So, Broadway musical. Then he also got into movies, several motion pictures over the years. Barney Oldfield's Race for a Life in 1913, which is a silent film. You can find that one online pretty easily if you want to watch it. The First Auto in 1927, and The Blonde Comet in 1941. And they also used Barney as a technical advisor for a racing scene in the movie Backstreet in 1941. So he had his time on Broadway, had his time in Hollywood, had a good racing career. Overall, the first of his kind, basically. Celebrity status race car driver. So pretty awesome to see. Little history lesson there. Like usual, we'll cover his awards. He was introduced into the Auto Racing Hall of Fame in 1952, the Automotive Hall of Fame in 1968, the Michigan Motorsports Hall of Fame in 1985, the Motorsports Hall of Fame of America in 1989, International Motorsports Hall of Fame in 1990, National Sprint Car Hall of Fame in 1990, the Saginaw County Hall of Fame in 2014. In addition, Oakshade Raceway in Ohio has held a race in his name since 1990. So there's a lot of old Barney Oldfield classics and whatnot there. So that's our history portion for Mr. Barney Oldfield. Thank you for all that you did to kind of create this whole thing we enjoy called racing. First of your kind. So this week we have a little mailbag question following our AJ Foyt episode last week. Clearly, AJ Foyt was born to drive. And the question being, do you think that level of drive and determination is true with drivers and teams today? Personal opinion, I do believe it's still very active today. There's different circumstances. You've got a lot less of the driver and mechanics once you get to the higher levels of sports. There's still some out there, but you still see a lot of that in the sprint car world. You see the driver mechanic type thing like Foyt was. As far as team owner, mechanic, and all that, I don't think we'll ever see that again outside of, the small midget series or sprint cars. And even that's becoming a more prolific, paid driver type situation. There's still small teams that do it. There's still some, wheel and modified series guys that are team owners, mechanics, and drivers. There's a few things here and there, but nothing to the success that Foyt had. And I don't think we'll see another era where you've got a driver, mechanic, team owner, and everything like that that's as successful as Foyt was. I just don't think it's something you can achieve these days with all these spec series and driver contracts and negotiations and sponsorship dollars. And it's just a completely different day and age. So appreciate the question on that one. I think the drive and passion's there, but I don't think we'll see anything similar anytime again. I think Foyt's kind of a one-off. Obviously, these drivers still have the passion for it, but I don't think that we'll see anything quite like we did with Mr. Foyt. That being said, we'll recap next week. We'll recap the Brickyard and Streets of Toronto and anything else in the dirt world that we've got going on. Appreciate the taking time out of your day to listen to this, and thanks for tuning in.
Thank you for sharing your time with us. If you enjoyed today's episode, make sure to subscribe and leave us a review wherever you listen to your podcasts. Don't forget to follow us at Historic Hot Laps on X and all your other social platforms for the latest updates and sneak peeks into upcoming episodes. You can reach out to us directly at historichotlaps@gmail.com. Send us your feedback, questions, comments, opinions, and additional subject matter you'd like us to cover. Thanks for tuning in.